Yeah, I'm Father Gerald Cavanagh. I'm a Jesuit priest. I started teaching first at Wayne State University. Uh, I had gotten my Jesuit vocation at a secular school, so I didn't go to a Jesuit school with the permission of my superior at that time. Wayne State, I had gotten my degree in management and org behavior at Michigan State, and so I thought I'd be teaching that. But it turns out that they had just developed a new MBA program, and they had a course in business ethics and social business and society. They said, we need somebody to teach it. Looks as though you have the background. Well, I really, way back in those days, I didn't want to be pigeonholed as a biased holy guy, so I figured, do I want to do that? But then I thought, well, this is a great opportunity. This was 1970. So I began teaching it, and frankly, that's been such a blessing in my life. And then looking back, I recognize that, wow, it happened, I didn't totally plan it. It was an opportunity, and I took it, and it was just the beginning of, well, actually, at this point, the Social Issues Division of the Academy was even earlier than Society for Business Ethics, and that was just beginning. So I went to the first meetings and, became, pretty active in that as a youngster. What else did I do at the university? Well, then I was there for 9 years until 1970. I'm giving away my age when I give you these dates. In 1978, Paula Catelli, who at that point was academic vice president at Santa Clara University, said, we're starting a chair of business ethics. We've got some money from Bank of America, Hewlett-Packard, Pacific Gas and Electric. We'd like you to be the first chair of the Dirksen Chair of Business Ethics at Santa Clara. Dirksen had been dean there for a long time and had been head of the Business School Accrediting Association, AACSB, so he was legendary at the time. Well, I did that. Actually, at that point, it really gave me a marvelous opportunity because Manny Velasquez had just finished his degree in philosophy at Cal, and he was starting to write his book. And he showed me the manuscript, and I said, Manny, you got some great ideas, but boy, if you want this to work, you've got to have cases. You've got to make it practical. Well, he did that, and the book really took off, and it's been one of the best sellers. And he thanked me again today for getting him on that track. Then, well, at the same time, I don't know if you want all this, and you can cut any out if you want to drop it. But just before that, I had been on the board of trustees at the University of Detroit, and I was chair of a search committee for our president. And I got Father Bob Mitchell to be president, and he said, well, you got me to come here, how about you? I said, yeah, you're right. I had convinced myself that this really was a place that is really trying to do a job for the city, for first generation kids, for poor kids, and that's where I wanted to be. I didn't want to stay at Santa Clara. They wanted me to stay at Santa Clara. So I came then to the University of Detroit, and I've been there since, except for 86, 87. I did the Gasson Chair at Boston College. And that was the same thing. Don Monin, who was president then, asked me, would you stay, or would you be willing to stay on and, be a provost? And no, I want to go back to Detroit, which I did. Let's see, what else?
Mercy, Detroit Mercy.
Yeah,
It was called Detroit Mercy. Why is
Detroit
it called
Mercy, yeah.
Detroit Mercy?
Then the university, let's see, this would be 89. The university merged with Mercy College of Detroit, which is a Sisters of Mercy school. And this was a major undertaking. Leading up to it, there was a lot of planning. A lot of the vice presidents left because they said, I don't know, am I going to have a job after this? And so Father Mitchell, Bob Mitchell, who were really good friends at that point, he said, now, would you be willing to be provost? Well, okay, so I saluted, and I said, yeah, okay, it's an important job, and it's important to do it. And So I did that for 6 years. And boy, if you can imagine, frankly, I think it's one of the only successful mergers of two colleges that we've had in the U.S. I've looked at a lot of the other ones, but what we did, we had to decide what was the core curriculum, what was the philosophy major, what were admission standards. We had to start all over again. We couldn't just say this is the way we did it. What was the way? Who did it? Because it was two institutions. So we had something like 30 committees which were looking at all of these issues, and equally balanced, equal number from Mercy College of Detroit and the University of Detroit. And then finally we decided on the name, lots of possibilities, decided University of Detroit Mercy would capture, the identity of both schools. And I kept, then Bob Mitchell, stepped down as president. Maureen Fay, actually she became the first non-Jesuit president of a Jesuit university at that time. That would have been 90. Oh yeah, it's way before Jack DeJoy at Georgetown. And she was then president, and she said, well, I'd like you to stay on. I thought it was just going to be temporary, Well, okay, I'd like to go back to teaching. Well, okay, one more year. So, well, this went on several. Well, after about 5 years, 6 years, I said, Maureen, I want to go back to teaching. That's really where I feel I can make my major contribution. Meanwhile, I always continued to come to the Academy of Management and Society for Business Ethics. I just wanted to stay connected. I didn't want to be, let loose from the disciplines for 5 or 6 years. I knew that would be bad news. It'd be harder to get back to it. And then finally I got back to teaching in, that would have been about 95, huh? Yeah, and then I've been teaching at Detroit Mercy. We got some money from the biggest bank in the city to set up a chair, the Charles Fisher Chair of Business Ethics, and that's what I've got. So, and that gave me a little bit lower of a teaching load, not as much as many as my peers, but I'm kind of jealous. But 2 courses a term, and I can manage that even at my old age. It's working out okay. And I love it. You were going to say something?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking of what else would be useful to you.
Well, talk about your remember you had an early book that's still in print, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, American Business Values. Yeah, that's an interesting story in itself. When I first started teaching at Wayne State, I talked about ethical issues. And they said, whose ethics? That's your ethics, not my ethics. Well, I learned you couldn't use the word ethics. That was a no-no. I mean, isn't that amazing? And so that's why I titled it American Business Values, which probably was a better title in any case. It's gone through 6 editions. It's a lot of work. I thought I had 2 folks who would help, and one guy helped with 1 edition, and then he said, yeah, this is a lot of work. How much do you get in royalties? And I told him, well, I'm not sure it's worth it. Okay, all right. And then another guy was going to do it, and he didn't. So anyway, but it's still it's a part of the Harvard core of books that any business school library should have, and I continue to use it. The cases are old, but I try to bring in new cases. Fortunately, there's a lot of new stuff around, so that's helpful. Yeah, I'm proud of that book. I guess in terms of other research contributions, when I was at Santa Clara, Manny Velasquez and Dennis Moberg and I decided that we wanted to do something that would help people understand business ethics and be able to use it, business faculty especially. And so we did an article. It was in the Academy of Management Review, and really the feature of it was a flow chart. We identified the basic ethical principles that everybody knows, rights and duties and justice and utilitarianism. And then we had a flow chart, when you'd use this and when you wouldn't and what questions to ask. Well, that became very popular. I remember, Academy of Management meeting a year or so later, Manny, went out into the floor of the book display, and he said, you know what? He said, half of the basic management textbooks has our model in it. Well, I felt pretty good about that too. That's a major contribution, and it does get a lot of hits still, and people are often referring to it.
And it's on the Marcola website too. The Marcola website.
That's right, it is. Yeah, and they've
So you
got
might say that.
that system. Yeah, right now. It's on the Marcola website at Santa Clara University, which is their Marcola Center for Applied Ethics, and so that. Yeah, Kirk Hansen has written it up, and I think done a good job. He's included common good, which I think should be included, which we didn't have. We just had those first three, and I think it's a good explanation of how it could be used. The other, I think, in terms of major contributions to the literature was some years later. Just when spirituality and management was beginning to get some interest, a guy asked me to write for it, and I did it. Spirituality and management, context and critique, and that has been a basic thing too. That just gets a lot of attention, even though it was ages ago. Still, because it's kind of basic and lays out the turf of, here are the opportunities, here's some problems you run into, and what are the values, for the business person and the business firm in doing it. Then I've done a lot of other stuff.
Where's that published? Spirituality and.
I should remember, shouldn't I? Did I write that out?
I don't know.
It was in organizational dynamic first, because I think. God, I should look. I should know where my own publications.
Well, I don't know where all mine are either.
I mean, that's a major one. I have no excuse.
We can look it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll drop that one in.
Okay,
Yeah,
good. Thank
no
you.
worries.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have remembered that.
Gretchen has herself, she'll.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, and then I've done a whole bunch of other publications and several other books. Actually, an early book that was my dissertation was I did with Father Ted Purcell. He had his degree from Harvard, a couple of books at Harvard. And boy, I was so lucky to be able to work with him. And we did interviewing of black and white workers in General Electric and one Westinghouse plant. And we interview 100 workers in each site and ask them half, 50%, 50 of each, and particularly the black workers. How are you received? Do you have opportunities for promotion? Then we wrote that up, Blacks in the Industrial World, and I had that book starting my career, so that was a big advantage. And that was when right after 68 racial concerns were about. So that was another one. And then a couple of other books, that haven't gotten quite the attention as those.
That's great. All right. Any other thing about your research you want to talk about? I didn't know about this blacks in the
Industrial World, yeah, that was early on. Yeah, that's in the 70s that came out.
Okay, good. Sam, we learn a lot with these.
Yeah, all along I've been interested in and done some talks and papers on what can we do globally for business, and how can we get businesses together to agree that there's maybe some common norms that we could use. One of the early organizations on that was the Co-Roundtable for Business, and I got involved in that because Tom Bausch, who was the head of AECSB, the Business School Accrediting Association, and dean at Marquette at the time, planned meetings all over the world. And so, I went to Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and Goa, India, and a bunch of other places. And it really, about that time, the Co-Roundtable principles had just come out. And I've written, a good bit about that. And then, this was a group of executives from major firms, originally from the US and Japan. Then now it's expanded well beyond that, to write a code of ethics, if you will, of benchmark principles for folks. And firms have used the Co-Roundtable principles as benchmarks. They're and I think they're quite good. And so I really tried to promote that. And then shortly after, the United Nations Global Compact with Business began, And that got much more publicity, and of course the UN has the visibility. So, and so I've tried to support that and written on that and gone to conferences. You're going to interview Ollie Williams. Ollie has done a lot of work with the United Nations Global Compact, and he's invited me to a number of the conferences, and so I've done papers on that. And that's been such a dilemma, how we can get an even playing field for business firms around the world. Where there's bribery in some places, and and they don't even see the problem with that. And how can we make it fair, for everybody? The other major issue that's concerned me, and I haven't done enough on research on this, is trying to bring people into economies that are very poor, that are being left out. And that's true, all over the world. It's true in the U.S. and developed countries, and even more so in developing countries. And of course, the gap in income between countries and between people within countries is just staggering. It's getting some attention now, in our current, political milieu with the Democratic candidates, and I'm thankful for that, because I think it should. I think it's unjust, to use our ethical terms, grossly unjust. And, I think it should be pointed out. Now the question is what we do about it, and that's more of a political question than I think a business ethics question, except, I always raise the question in class with my students, what's an adequate salary for a CEO or a high-level manager? And of course, they don't see any problem because they feel they're going to be the guy with the $100 million. Okay, so I lost on that one. But at least you try to get them thinking about it a little bit. Maybe later on, it'll come back to them and they'll say, yeah, okay, yeah. When they don't make their $100 million, maybe they'll say there's a gap, unfair gap.
Can I ask you?
Sure. Tom.
A lot of people here, virtually everybody, has mentioned the Jesuits in particular in the field of business ethics and what they brought to the field and everything else like that. Can you explain to everybody what it is specific about the Jesuit training, perhaps Ignatian practice, etc., that has been of value to the field of business ethics from your perspective, from being a Jesuit? Yeah,
I must say I'm very proud of what Jesuits themselves have done in the area of business ethics and Jesuit universities. Very early on, the first books were written by Jesuits. Ray Baumhart was the first one to do a doctorate at Harvard Business School in business ethics, and he wrote a book on it and an article in Harvard Business Review. And his research has been replicated a couple of times in Harvard Business Review. Then he became dean at Loyola and then president at Loyola. And he's still with us, God bless him. There was a very early book in the 50s on morality, business and morality.
Wurtenberger.
Henry Wurtenberger.
I had the Wurtenberger
Yeah,
chair.
thank you. I was trying to search for his. I could visualize him because I knew him, but Henry Wurtenberg's very early book. Well, it fits because I think in the Society of Jesus, a basic principle is equity, helping people that don't have an advantage. That we ought to be right there on the margins with those who most need help. And we have an education, we've got a background, and we've got schools. So what an opportunity. And frankly, that has really guided my whole life. Both my choice of where I want to be, what city I want to be, where I want to teach, and also the work that I do. What's the best way to help? And frankly, I'm also very proud of the leadership that Jesuit universities have taken in the business ethics area. And boy, you go across the board. And individuals from those schools, and the schools themselves. Now, part of that is I think that, we think that doing the right thing is pretty darn important in any kind of a professional education. And so we have a required course or learning goal, we talk about it now, in ethics and social responsibility, and so many people have begun in various Jesuit institutions, and I think that, as I say, I'm very proud of that. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, I mean, I guess your mission is clear. Is there anything specific about the way you teach, your pedagogy, coming from your training, that is different in just in terms of teaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. Different pedagogy. Yeah, the Ignatian pedagogy is experiential, is getting into the dirt, getting into the facts of the case, not to be theoretical or abstract, but frankly in the rationales, because it works better, just helping people deal with specific issues. And I think that characterizes. We've also got in our spirituality, seeing God in all things. We see the value of every human being, every part of nature. That's one reason that Pope Francis had his letter on Laudato Si. I mean, it certainly expresses that vision that this globe is precious. And wow, it's so precious, we want to hand it on in one piece and in decent shape, to future generations. The other is, we talk about contemplative inaction, which is being reflective as we move along, not to just barrel ahead and do stuff, but to be aware of what's the impact on people, on the world, of what we do. And that's important too. And then, of course, Ignatian thing of the end of the day, just reflect on it. And how's the day gone? What are the good things I've done? What are the things that I'm not so proud of? And how am I going to do it better tomorrow? Am I going to avoid those ugly things? That personally, that helps. Probably ought to teach more of that in class. Huh? That would help, maybe.
I think that's true. Actually, I was just thinking that as you said that we all have, that should be the end of the framework for thinking, is on reflection. That should be the last line.
You're
Number
right.
8 or number 8 you have for the framework for moral reasoning. The last one should be, let's step back and reflect and see.
Yeah.
Good point. I think I'm going to add that to the brochure. So I'm going to remodel your brochure. So, I'm picking on her always.
Yeah. I mean, Ignatius Loyola started that.
Yes.
But Ben Franklin talked about it. It's pretty basic. I mean, just to
But
be
we
aware.
don't do it very often.
I know. And frankly, one of the things I fear is that we're getting into this hyper, internet scene where, I really feel bad that kids are walking across campus and they never look up. They don't talk to each other. They're always in their handhelds. And, they don't think, they don't reflect. This may get us off the subject, but one of the issues that I ask in class, you can't teach business ethics, I don't think, unless people are aware of what's going on out there in the world. And I ask, how do you get your news? Well, 20 years ago it was they'd read the papers and, well, now how do they get their news? It's Facebook and friends. You want to say what? What's going to happen to our world and to any democracy? They're just not informed, and of course that's a way of reinforcing biases, and that's one of the problems we face now. And that would call for reflection. Well, the other thing that I've done, and it's in my American Business Values book, is I asked my students, I asked both the MBAs in different forms, MBAs and undergrads, to write a paper on their personal goals. What are their goals in career, in personal relationships, in leisure, education, spirituality, religion, a couple of other categories. And then just list them, but I don't necessarily want to see that, but I want you to write a paper on this. This gives you the foundation. First 2 paragraphs, what in your life has most influenced your goals? Your family, maybe somebody died, a grandparent or an uncle, or maybe you failed a course in high school, and did that force you to rethink your goals and your values? And then I ask them to write that up in a paper. And boy, I've had many students come back later and they say, boy, this really changed my goals. I realized that for the MBAers especially, that I had been acting as if my career goals were the most important, but I realize now it's my family that's the most important thing for me. And so I've got to change the way I do things. Well, God bless. If better to learn it now than before it's too late. And that sort of thing. And people much later on have also, come back and said it's a good thing. So I'm proud of that too. And that's been picked up in various ways by other folks in writing and in books.
What are you happiest about what's being picked up by other people from your work? What do you get most pride out of?
That I think that is the goals thing, and that's because I think that digs deeper into who a person is, and people rarely reflect on that unless they have to, unless there's a tragedy in their life, or unless they have to do a project, and so that's really important. I'm glad about the other stuff, about the flow charts and the other articles, but people read that and forget it, for good or for worse. But frankly, I'm in it to change lives for the better. I really want to make people better people, and on their own terms. What they think is a better person. I want you to be the best person, whatever way you want to define it. But give it some thought. Don't just get on the escalator or just keep moving along according to somebody else's notions. But you decide where you want to go and what you want to do. And I think that is what I'm most proud of. To what extent has that been successful? I don't know. I mean, sometimes we worry when it comes to the ethics stuff. That slides off of them, but hopefully not. Hopefully at least something sticks. And I think something does stick. Not as much as any of us would like, but something does.
I want to bring up a thorny question.
Sure.
If I'm not mistaken, Ivan Bosky went to the University of Detroit, the first convicted insider trader. I think he went to the University of Detroit.
If that's true, I'm not aware of that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so I just don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have
We can
many.
look that up.
We didn't have many finance people.
Well,
He didn't start as a financer.
I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know what he was either. I remember the name. That's all I can remember.
It's the
of.
junk
Well,
bond.
I'll look that up next, but is it the Journal of Organizational Change Management in 1999?
Thank you. You're terrific. Look at that.
That's that little handheld that helps.
I know. I give kids the hard time doing it all the time, but that's the advantage.
So if you say that, then we could edit it in, right?
Yep.
So,
It's BOESKY, I think.
yeah.
If you want to say it again to camera, we can drop that in.
I gotta remember.
Journal of Organizational Change Management.
Yeah, the Journal of Organizational Change Management is the 1999. Huh? Yeah.
So how do you see the field going? Where are we? What are we going to? We probably won't be here, but what are we going to look like in? Well, you'll be here. But what is this going to look like in 20 years? What is the field and the Society for Business Ethics? You've always been a great supporter of the society.
Yeah,
all of us.
that's true.
And with social issues in management too.
Yeah, that's a good question, Pat. And boy, I wish I had. Where we're going in the future is I mean, there's so many tough issues coming down the pike.
For example,
artificial intelligence, globalization, poverty, widespread, the income gap. Those are huge issues. I think we've got to deal with them if we have any integrity as business ethics scholars. And I think if we continue on a integral path with some integrity, that we will deal with them. And frankly, I was delighted last night at the lecture, the woman from the World Bank, and Ollie Williams asked her, well, what about working with the United Nations Global Compact? She says, we've been trying to do that for a long time. Let's us meet. well, what a wonderful outcome. Here it was in public, in front of all of us. Yeah, so that's a good outcome, I would say, and something I think. Now I don't know what's going to happen, but she's going to come up to New York when they're in session. So that's she's serious about it, trying to eliminate corruption, and that's such a major problem, across the world. Artificial intelligence is a tough one. We've all read a lot about it and thought a lot about it, and I don't have any quick answers of how to deal with it, but we've got to deal with it. And actually, it's a model of technology itself. We're so adept at developing new technology. We put it in place before we think of what it means and what its applications are and how it's going to affect people. That's not always a good idea, and if it's not good, then you can sue them. Well, then it may be too late. A lot of people are hurt. The Europeans are more cautious on that, and I think they're smarter than we in the U.S. But artificial intelligence is a big one in terms of technology. Well, I hope we'll be able to deal with that. Yeah. The other contribution I would have to say, this goes way back now. We're jumping eras. It must have been in the 80s. Kirk Hansen had a meeting at Stanford of people in business ethics and in from Society for Business Ethics and for the Social Issues Division. You may have been there. I don't remember all the folks.
I think it was at Santa Clara, though. Was it at Stanford?
Yeah, it was at Stanford, I think.
No, I was there, but I can't.
Okay.
That's when Manny Bleskos decided I was a nun. Never heard this.
She's never let him forget that.
He said it's because I had nun shoes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really remember that. And I thought Bill Frederick was a Jesuit. Just imagine. Anyway,
Well,
this guy was
he'd love it.
He did.
He'd get a big kick out of it.
Well, he did. They all got it. We all got hysterical. Anyway, that's the sidelight. Sorry, we'll take that off.
Sister of Little Mercy.
But the advantage of that was that, frankly, we wanted to get the groups to meet together. That was the major outcome, positive outcome as far as I was concerned. Because up to that time, it had been meeting with the American Philosophical Association, and then it did, and then Tom Dunphy was president one year, and he wanted to meet every other year with the American Legal Association, and he did it one year. He lost a lot of people who just didn't go, and so I love Tom Dunphy, but I think he recognized that was, and the rest of us recognized it. It'd be good to have it be stable. One downside to that is that, in the 70s, prior to that, I organized a group of Jesuits interested in business and management, and we would meet in the city that the academy was meeting in. And frankly, my purpose was just to encourage interest in young Jesuits and older people in business ethics, social responsibility, teaching in business schools. And, we had 15 people that would come. There aren't that many people around now that would be doing it, unfortunately. But I think it had a really good impact of building solidarity, helping best practices. But we could no longer do that because SBE came in, before the academy meetings. But by that time, I think it had run its course anyway, the meeting. But that was another initiative that I began, and I also did one in Detroit during those same years, trying to gather the local people who were teaching business ethics, at Oakland University and University of Michigan, and I was at Wayne State at the time, and the people at University of Detroit, and just again best practices. So we needed support in those early days because there wasn't much around. We were pretty lonely out there, and ethics in a business school? Are you kidding? But we talked about it, and how you deal with it and how we forge ahead. So that was another good initiative.
Detroit must have been it's almost a petri dish for the last 50 years of American industrialization and post-industrialization.
Well, you're right.
Yeah. So, has that been? How's that affected your work? Being in the middle of seeing it go from Motown to No Town.
Yeah, it's affected us in a number of ways. Of course, in those early days, all of the auto firms provided tuition remission. So our MBA program just was gangbusters. Then with the downturn and the problems they had, the early downturn, almost bankruptcy, well actually everybody but Ford did go through bankruptcy, they cut back on tuition remission. And so they're bringing it back a little bit now, so that helps. But that just hurt our MBA program. That's how it hit us. And then of course, so many of the executives, that I knew were very good friends. The positive side of that for Detroit was Dan Gilbert, who owns Quicken Loans and Rocket Mortgage, moved his headquarters from the suburbs of Detroit to downtown Detroit. Then he proceeded to purchase 25 of the high-rises, the skyscrapers downtown that were largely empty, and he refurbished them. Now they're all full. And now our grads want to move downtown. They want to live downtown. So that really affects, the city, the university. And we've had very good leadership, a marvelous mayor now. And when the city went through bankruptcy, we had marvelous representations. The three guys were just terrific. The bankruptcy judge, the advocacy judge, and another. Just immensely talented.
So facing the challenges that you were mentioned before about AI and all those sort of things, which are going to have a societal effect. This is not just singular occupations or sectors. How will what you've learned in Detroit, how you've been through almost the process. What have you learned that could be a benefit now to, say the SB going forward, their political dimension to their work?
Yeah, I would say at the very least, when things look bad, don't give up and keep working on trying to make them better. And if you work hard enough and figure it out, it'll work. It will get better. And sometimes it's hard to realize that. It's easy to get discouraged. I'd say that for the university. The University of Detroit went through some very difficult times. But by gosh, we're doing fine. We don't have a huge endowment like BC or Notre Dame, but by God, we're okay. We're doing all right.
And a good football team.
Gretchen, do you have any questions? We're gonna
So I'm interested, Jerry, in
Sure.
the impact all your work has had on companies. You've talked a lot about the impact on schools, on professors, on students. Have you done work with companies? If so, any examples, stories, information about how the work you've done, the ideas that you've had have impacted particular organizations?
Sure. Early on, I did some consulting, and I've done a little bit of it, not as much as I might have done. But I think probably the best contribution has been with working with executives, some of which I had taught in the MBA program, and then later on. I think of one guy who is, his last job, he was, what do they call him? Director of the office of the chairman at Ford. So he was a very close friend. He really operated the office for Bill Ford. And now he's director of, outreach for Ford. And again, we've been very good friends. We have dinner regularly, and just want to get together. Another guy, he was at Deloitte Touche, and his last job there was managing director for sustainability. And now he's actually head of the chairman of the Global Reporting Initiative, which is a basic institution in measuring what a firm is doing and trying to make it comparable in terms of environmental and social impact and governance, in addition to the financial. Now, both of those guys I've actually done papers with and done work with and done presentations at organizations. And as I say, they're both good friends and alumni, and I taught them. So that's kind of nice too. That's one advantage of getting old. You've taught a lot of people that are successful. I don't look for the ones that aren't. They're out there, I suppose.
You have to be.
Yeah.
Did you find out about Ivan Buskin?
I did. I found out that he went to the University of Detroit College of Law. Is that?
Well, that's part of the University of Detroit.
You're right. You're right.
But he did law.
Well, but still,
Yeah.
could he have gone there without taking? I suppose in the College of Law, he could have gone there without taking ethics, right?
Yeah, I doubt that they had ethics.
So he went to, let's see, the Cranbrook School in Bloomfield
Oh,
Hills.
that's high-end private school, the best private school.
Where did Michael
He
Mil-
graduated, though, from Mumford High School.
Okay,
He then attended courses at Wayne State. This is according to Wikipedia, so take
Sure.
it for what it's worth.
sure.
Attended courses at Wayne State, Eastern Michigan, and the University of Michigan. Despite lacking an undergraduate degree, he was admitted to Detroit College of Law, now Michigan State University College of Law, and graduated during 1965.
Oh, that's not us.
That's not you.
No, that's a school that was in downtown Detroit.
Okay.
Oh, so it's not you, okay,
No,
well,
no.
that's fine.
Yeah, quit it.
The answer is no, no.
Michael Milliken.
Oh, Michael Milliken, you think
Yeah,
he might have gone
maybe.
there? Oh, yeah, what are we going to
Well,
do?
we
Look
certainly
at all
know-
the evil
No,
people
I
in
don't
the
think
We
I
city?
certainly
did.
know
No,
a
he's-
certain man Trump went through the doors very
He's
fast.
Jewish. He did probably do that.
I think he was from the east someplace. I had forgotten Boski was from Detroit, but you're right, yeah.
He was from
Yeah.
Detroit, I remember.
Mumford High School at that point was largely a Jewish school, a public school.
He may be
Very
Jewish, I
bright
don't know.
people.
I
He,
don't know.
Boski is Jewish, according to this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but now it's largely black. But it's it's still.
Well, now, do you have any more? We have to wrap up because I've got someone else coming. But now, do you have any?
You guys are too interesting.
No, you
Well, we
are.
love it. No, you're really interesting. But we. Do you have any other last comments on the society, or you, or the future, or the past, or whatever?
I guess one final thing is that I've been lucky to be able to serve on a number of university board of trustees, 7 of them of Jesuit schools. And, I think in that capacity, I've tried to help steer the course in terms of, investments. I'm not on the investment committee, but when issues come up, to try to help the institution stay true to its mission. That's been a gift, to be able to do that. And this is from, Fordham on the East Coast to Santa Clara on the West Coast and many in between. So I'm really, as I say, I've been happy to be able to make that contribution also.
They're lucky to have you,
Well, thank you, Patricia.
of course.
Can I ask one very quick one?
Yes. Yeah.
What are American business values as opposed to business values?
Yeah, the reason I picked that as a title was largely because everybody wanted to have American values early on. That was one of the reasons. And I think we've articulated them more, I shouldn't say we act them out more readily and specifically, I think, than in other areas. Now, what's the difference? Well, that'd be pretty complicated country to country, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any? There are singular American business values that would be different from everybody else's, are there?
Yeah, I think the Protestant ethic,
Right.
in a word, that'd be a whole
No, that's okay.
conversation.
Yeah. I get.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not true in every country.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm Irish. So you don't have to tell me about
All
that.
right.
I'm interested in asking a question about your administrative experience in sitting on these boards. We often say that it's the boards, the tone from the top, it's the senior people in an organization that are going to drive a commitment to business ethics in businesses. Probably also true to the teaching of business ethics in schools. If you had to give advice to current deans, future deans, presidents of universities, what would you tell them about incorporating business ethics education?
Well, if it's a dean, I'd say it's absolutely essential in your school to have ethics in the curriculum, and I would say a course, a dedicated course, and then I think it all should be integrated, in every other course. I think it's critical who you hire, and boy, I went through that as provost and acting dean for a couple of years. The people you hire really determine where you're going to be, for the next generation. Hiring is important, and then of course promotion. What are the advancement criteria, for folks? What do you expect? I think those two things are largely the things. The bit of advice I'd give, to people that were deans or provosts in schools. And frankly, I've given that advice to a couple of our Jesuit schools that will remain nameless, and it's turned around their programs in 2 of them. One of them didn't pay any attention to me, and I'm still mad at him for not paying any attention to me.
None of us have ever had that problem.
That's right.
Most
help my
convincing
children.
argument, what's the most convincing argument for your fellow trustees?
Oh, what's our mission as a school? What are we about? If we're the same as the secular school next door, then we might as well quit. Why bother? And I
That's a
really
good
believe that.
question.
Yeah,
Some Jesuit universities don't ask that question,
yeah.
and they try to be too much.
And that's to their detriment.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, and it's easy to slide into that because those are the secular norms, if you will, of what it means to be an institution. They get on the lists, of Forbes and, U.S.
Are you happy just finally the succession and legacy? Because I mean, unfortunately, there's few men left from the order. Are you happy that the ethos has been taken up and being run by the lay staff, etc.?
Yeah, but again, I think that's where the board is critical. Who you select as president, because many of them now are lay presidents. Frankly, I think some of those have been terrific. And they're, in one sense, they're better able to articulate the Jesuit mission than Jesuits. Because when we do it, they say, "Oh, that's your bag. That's your stuff." But now the question is, I hope we can continue that in generations later. So we'll see. But I think generally we're off to a pretty good start now. The majority of Jesuit universities now are headed by folks that are not Jesuit, and that was not true even a decade ago.
And see if you agree with this notion of spirituality, but not any particular religion identified, I think is becoming another. We've heard that from other of you back as a topic for business ethics, but not necessarily Jesuit spirituality or Jewish spirituality, whatever. But it's the idea of the other, the idea of something beyond us, and I think that I see that coming back. I mean, it was there before and kind of lost in the weeds a long time ago. But I think it's sort of interesting to see that.
Well, it's
so that helps the Jesuit universities.
Yes.
Because they've got. I mean, they say, well, yeah. I mean, that's sort of dumb, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I think that it then encourages the secular universities to think about who they are and what they're doing and what their mission is, and they don't always do that.
No, you're
and
right.
not all the Jesuit universities do it either. I'm sorry to say.
Well, they do it differently, certainly. Yeah.
Well, we do it differently. That's a more diplomatic way to say it than I've said, because you're much more diplomatic than I am, as you know.
Well, you may be more accurate.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. This was just wonderful.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed being with you guys.